Hour 2 Overdrive continues, brought to you by FanDuel, bringing you everything from the opening line to the final score. Jays Sox tonight, Jays Tigers tomorrow down in Detroit. Waiting on Leaf news, waiting on Raptor news. A lot of rumors out there, a lot of conjecture on both sides in terms of what else could take place, right? Siakam's name's out there a lot. I don't know if I'm buying it, but we'll see.
Well,
his name's out there. His name is out there.
Let's not forget, Masai Ujiri, the president of the team, stood in front of a microphone after the season was over and said, I did not enjoy watching my team play.
Right.
So I think anything's in play.
Well, Fred walked on them.
Yeah.
You know, by all accounts, they wanted to keep VanVleet. I don't know how committed they were to trying to keep him, but enough where they were going to put an offer in front of him.
Oh, yeah.
Right? And they did put an offer in front of him, and he still left. So I guess, you know, anything is possible with this front office. But
I mean, you get the sense that Masai Ujiri's antsy. He's ornery, not happy.
Right.
So, and then, you know, you hear Pascal Siakam's agent leaking that he doesn't want to sign anywhere else. He wants to play in Toronto. Well, that's not going. I don't think that's going to sit well with Masai Ujiri. I'm not putting words in his mouth, but just knowing him and knowing how he has behaved, you don't want to be bullied.
No,
be told what
especially
to do.
like Siakam's a guy he's invested a lot in.
Yeah.
Right. And listen, credit to Pascal. He's built himself up. The player has put the work in, and he's grown into being a very, very good player.
No doubt.
But I'm sure Masai feels like he's done a lot for Pascal, and the idea of Pascal possibly trying to modify plans based on his own actions, I'm not sure that would go over well. I agree with you.
And the fact remains, he's been a very good player, and they were a pretty mediocre team.
Yeah, that's right.
With him being a very good player.
That's right. More on that later in the hour, including what Jakob Poeltl had to say about his signing and Fred VanVleet and the timeline, which I found quite interesting earlier today. But tomorrow night is go time. It is go time in Detroit. Alek Manoah returning. It was a month ago today he was sent down to the Florida Complex League. A month ago today, he will return to the Bigs tomorrow night. Here's the GM of the Blue Jays, Ross Atkins. And Ross will begin with what has been a wild story. One of the craziest stories I can recall in a long time. The story of Alek Manoah. And I'd ask you out of the gate here, take us through the process. A lot of people wondering why, after just a month, you've decided tomorrow night is the right time to bring Alek Manoah back up to the major leagues.
Yeah, I think the first way to answer that is the most important factor is that we feel he gives us the best chance to win. I think thinking through the entire season, it's also important to factor in his entire career, what he has accomplished to date, and especially as a major league pitcher and what he's meant to this organization. A big part of the decision, the largest part of the decision, we wanted to be objective about it because of the things that I said, right? The desire to win, our belief and faith in him, and his desire to be back. So we had very objective markers that we wanted to make sure he was moving towards. And that started with getting a really objective take in a pitching lab, which I can talk more about exactly what a pitching lab is. But getting a really objective take visually on how his body was moving, how the baseball was coming out of his hand, what that result would mean at the major league level and where the opportunities were. And we mutually agreed upon where we felt where the highest leverage opportunity would be within his delivery. It was very quickly exciting for him and something that he put to work in a couple of controlled settings before he was back facing hitters. He was facing hitters in those controlled settings, but not in actual games. And we saw significant progress in the process, which would be his delivery, and then the outcomes, which would be his pitches. And then ultimately in that last game and results was, of course, where you can't just eliminate results from being a part of your decision, but we were trying to stay away from those as much as possible. And in the end, just felt very good about the work that he had put in. And the last piece of the equation is, okay, what's the best environment for him to be in for this next step? And does he need another start or two at a higher level at AAA? And we just decided, and mutually, of course, he was a part of that. The next step for him was to be here in the major leagues. And I'm fired up for him. He's worked really hard and he's earned it. So I'm looking forward to tomorrow.
So you mentioned the word mutual a couple times there, Ross. And I'm curious, why that would be a part of the process. When you look at the way he struggled, Does that suggest he was well aware of what the problems were, or did you have to coach him towards understanding what the problems were?
Well, I mean, I think mutual, like anything, you don't develop players, right? Like maybe you can develop someone to play at a very low level, but at this caliber, you can't do it to someone, right? They have to be involved in the process and included and agree with the decisions on what the highest leverage opportunities may be. So, and then answering your question on, including him in that process and the magnitude of it, I can't imagine another way, really.
So was he was prepared to go down? Is that, like, was he aware when he came off the mound his last time out, this is enough? Like, I have to get away from the majors? Or was that something you had to sell him on?
Yeah, I mean, listen, like you'd have to talk to him about his exact feelings, and I don't want to speak for him. I think when we got to that point, no player of that caliber is ever happy about something like that. And at this, as difficult of a time as it was for him, his professionalism and his commitment never wavered. But like any human being, the results and the outcomes are going to impact how you feel about competing the next time. And so that became a variable, and you would have to get him to tell you exactly how he felt. I don't think he was at all happy about that. I can tell you that. But I also know that he was motivated to get back to being the best he could be.
So, Ross, we saw it on the outside. We saw the lack of results from a guy who'd finished third in Cy Young voting, suddenly having a hard time getting 3 outs on any given night. We saw the velocity down. We saw the command waning. He was leading the American League in walks when he went to the Florida Complex League. But when you got him in the lab, what can you share about what you saw in terms of what the problem was?
Yeah, so it really comes down to a couple of things, and this is always a little bit sensitive, talking about someone and something as nuanced as their delivery, the usage, the arsenal, and what the outcomes are, and it's so much better to hear it from the player. Having said that, I'm comfortable sharing a little bit more about the specifics, and it really came down to where and how he was releasing his pitches. And then you peel back and say, okay, how is he getting to that point? And we were able to see some very small differences that you wouldn't pick up with your naked eye. Maybe somebody would, but it really takes having high-level, fast cameras to pick up in small differences in delivery. And that's one thing to see those, but then it's another to find the reason. And I think what the lab and what we hope the lab has helped us discover is that we found the reason that we saw those subtle differences in the delivery and how he was getting to his release point. And so talking about that further and more specifically, I would just rather he be the person to do it.
With Ross Atkins, GM of the Jays. So Manoah on the mound tomorrow night. With that information you just supplied us, though, about how detailed it is and how minuscule the change can be, how does that apply to Pete Walker tomorrow night, to John Schneider tomorrow night, in terms of them watching him after a reset? Do you just start from scratch and act as if it's, the opening day where you've got high hopes for this guy and it's all good? You give him the ball and hopefully it gives you 7 strong? Or are they going to change the way they approach his start tomorrow night?
No, that's a great question, Brian, and that is the art of coaching. I wish this were a science. I wish it really were just about a lab, but it isn't. Mm-hmm. That is just another tool that we have at our hands in the modern game today, and not everyone is fortunate to have this level or this caliber of tools that we were able to tap into. But I think then what you do is, all the science, all the data in the world, it's not going to matter if you can't connect and if you can't give it reason, or if you can't find a way to give it reason to the player that they should be making this adjustment. And then it comes back to what is that cue that allows them to more consistently get to that point where they are at the most powerful position to release that ball. And it comes back to that cue, which is a big part of mindset, and it's a big part of, I'm sure, we've joked a little bit about golf on this show before, yep. But I use it as an analogy all the time, and I think pitching is very similar. Far too often you'll see the result of the ball and just not be able to correct it and fix it. And we're confident that we've made huge progress that way with Alek by finding what the core issue was and him finding it and having been through it, feeling excitement about that and being able to work towards that. That doesn't mean that a pitcher comes back to dominance, to Cy Young performance necessarily. It could. Sometimes it happens very quickly. Sometimes it takes time to rebuild that pattern and rebuild that delivery that is going to provide that consistency again. And again, we're just confident that this environment, our staff here, and not only this environment of our staff and the resources around us, but also competing against major league hitters that he's ready for and is the best next step for him in his progression.
With Ross Atkins, GM of the Jays, so we're into July, a few weeks out from the trade deadline. You guys have been very lucky with the rotation in terms of health. And outside of Alek, you guys have gotten great production. Barrios has bounced back. Kikuchi's bounced back. Osman and Bassett have been outstanding for you. And Alek's not out because of an injury. But I'm curious how you balance, the two leading up to a drop-dead deadline now, Ross, in terms of the fact that you haven't had injuries. You still got a lot of ball games left. Do you kind of prepare for the worst-case scenario that injuries very well could pop up? And if Alek, returns to a situation where he's giving you production that would be equivalent of a fourth starter in a rotation or a fifth starter even, but a guy you're comfortable putting out there every fifth day, how does that possibly affect what you're going to do between now and the deadline?
That would impact us very well, obviously. Having said that, you still have to always be thinking about how you can build as much depth as possible. So with Hyun Jin Ryu coming back into the fold, hopefully within a month, maybe a little bit longer than that, that would be incredible if it were within a month. Mm-hmm. But, it might take longer than that. Just being an option within 2 months is a very positive thing for us. And, thinking about our AAA development and the players that continue like Bowden Francis. And we still believe that Mitch White can be a factor in providing length for us. But one of the hardest things to acquire after acquiring, star caliber players like Vladdy and Bo and Alek is optionable, high-level contributing major league players in the form of potentially a AAA starting pitcher that could be in AAA for you, and you would feel confident to bring back to the major leagues. So that would be ideal, but that is not an easy thing to acquire, obviously.
So we heard Ryu, obviously. There's an optimistic viewpoint that he could become a factor in your rotation or out of the bullpen. What's kind of between now and then, what does he need to do, and sort of, what's your level of optimism that he's going to be able to get it done?
Yeah, it's really, so when you're coming back from a Tommy John surgery, the timeline is anywhere from 12 to 15 months, and sometimes it can linger a little bit past 15 months if it goes well. The industry, the medical world, the baseball world is much better at being successful with these transitions from Tommy John surgery. Each year we get better and better at it, and Hyun Jin Ryu is in incredible shape right now. He looks very good. His stuff is already back to a level that we feel could be contributing at some point. Having said all of that, he still has to be built up as a starter, and then he has to recover as a starter. So that is a very difficult part of this process when you are recovering from Tommy John surgery. Difficult, these guys are professional athletes. When I say difficult, it's hard to get through it without any setbacks, without feeling some tightness, without feeling some stiffness and needing an extra day or 3 or 4 before you get back out there in that next turn.
With Ross Atkins, GM of the Jays. So your manager, John Schneider, is about to hit the 1-year anniversary on the job. How do you think your players have responded to his approach?
Awesome. Yeah. Schneid's he's very smart. He's incredible. He's an incredible baseball man. Just his ability to study the game, constantly thinking about baseball and thinking about the human beings that play it. He's checking a lot, if not all of the boxes. I think the last one is just doing it more and getting the experience at this level of leading the best in the world at something, which doesn't happen overnight. You don't just step into that job and you're the best at it in the world. But he has all of the attributes to do that. We have been nothing but blown away by his impact, and I know he has a deep connection with our players.
So we're butting up against the All-Star break, Ross, and one of the things that's going to happen is your guy Vladdy's going to be in the home run derby. You know, I've heard many mixed emotions from, you know, managers and general managers about participating in that, you know, the home run fest. How do you feel about it in the case of Mr. Guerrero?
Yeah, I mean, it always comes down to how the player feels about it. And if he had any trepidation, I would be concerned. And he didn't. And I think there's different points in different players' careers and how they're feeling physically. And he is as strong as he's ever been. He's recovering exceptionally well. He's very mature for his age. He understands the magnitude of that and the potential negative impact and how to approach it. He's obviously been through it. So nothing but excitement for his contribution or his willing or desire to compete in that.
So you guys got a doubleheader against an AL Central team today. Then you're in Detroit, AL Central. You're doing pretty well against the Central. Pretty good against the West. Pretty good against the National League. There's something about the AL East. You guys are 7-20 within the division. What is the explanation there, Ross? What is your read on why the team is struggling so much against the AL East?
Yeah, I mean, listen, like if I had an answer, then it probably wouldn't be happening as much, so
right.
I think part of it is that, the AL East is very good. So the competition is stiff. Part of it is our schedule was extremely stressful with a ton of games on the road to start the year. And then another part of it is there's been a ton of consistency on our team. Certain things haven't synced up at the same time, whether that be a really good starting performance with, a solid offensive performance and a great bullpen performance with no defensive miscues, right? So we've done that a lot more than most teams, and we are in a strong position, albeit we'd rather be at the top of our division, which would be the strongest position. But I love this team. We love this team. We have an incredible amount of confidence that this team is going to get hot. It's already a team that no one wants to play. And once we get hot, hopefully it's at the right time and we can just, turn it into a real significant run.
Yeah. Go ahead, Dave.
Yeah, Ross, when you're watching this team, obviously one of the frustrating things for fans has been the performance with runners in scoring position. Obviously near the bottom of the league, near the bottom of baseball in that particular stat. How much of that from your eye is just dumb luck, the randomness of not getting the right hits at the right time, and how much of it is maybe approach? And can you guys improve in those situations in your mind?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, right? Like that's why we love sport. And anyone with a mathematic background would tell you that it is luck. Like that if you just look, you cannot prove that there is such a thing as really good clutch hitting, that there are guys that are just exceptional at hitting with better than hitting with runners in scoring position. There are some outliers. I like to have this discussion all the time because everyone knows there's a different feeling and a different sense when the stakes are higher. Mm-hmm. It's interesting that I use the word stakes. That's what baseball lifers refer to RBIs.
Right.
So there has to be some level of heightened pressure for all athletes across the game. And I don't worry about approach. That I've never seen. I've never had that concern. I've never had the concern of, are they, not thinking about the right thing to be doing here? I think there is some level of luck, and I think there is some level of these guys want it so bad that is there some a little bit of pressure. Like why is it that we score less when Kevin Gossman is on the mound? Now I'm creating another narrative there, but yeah.
He wants to know the answer on that. Believe me.
But it's a real. We are human beings, and they're not just narratives. They become not necessarily realities, but things that you think about and they can leak in, and then that makes it harder to perform. Now, that's a lot of words for saying that, yes, there is some level of pressure that all professional athletes feel. And is there some level of that? It doesn't feel that way in our clubhouse. It feels like an incredibly confident group. that knows things are going to turn.
I don't think we've asked you about the new park and the new buzz and vibe down there. The crowds have been outstanding this year, Ross. What do you make of it? I mean, when you consider where you were 2 or 3 years ago, you guys were down in Florida, you're down in Buffalo. The dust is settled now. You got new dimensions. You got new parties going on at the park. What do you make of home games this year?
Oh, it's awesome. I love it for our players. I love it for our fans. It really is an incredible environment. It's really cool to hear the visiting teams that come in and have been here before and see the changes and the differences, the way they talk about the environment, the level of excitement within it, and just how loud it gets. It's an incredible feeling. It's also really cool for me. I travel with the team somewhat, and when I'm in other stadiums and ballparks and feeling like we have moved towards having one of the better ones in the game, next year we'll take another step that way. It all starts with the fans and them being engaged, and you can definitely feel it.
Always appreciate you finding time for us. I know it's a busy time of year. Thank you, Ross.
All right, Brian, thanks. Thanks for having me on. Good to talk to you, Dave, as well.
Thanks, Ross.
There he is, Ross Atkins, GM of the Jays. Alek Manoah coming up. I don't know. We'll see. We'll see what happens. He's excited. Right? They better be excited. You got to be optimistic. You got to hope it's going to work out clearly. They wouldn't do it if you thought it was going to be a disaster. But that'll be one of the more intriguing starts of the year, without question. I would suggest probably at the top of the list, right? The number one start of the year is how did Manoah do in Detroit when he got called up?
It's a must-see moment. This is a must-see moment.
Yeah,
because it's going to tell you a lot about the way this season's going to go for the Blue Jays, is it not? Like, I mean, not that he couldn't have a stumble out of the gate here and find his way back to being a guy they can put in the rotation. I'm not expecting miracles here. I'm not expecting this guy is suddenly going to go from getting shelled in the Florida Complex League, what was it, a week and a bit ago?
Yep. To
commanding his pitches and throwing with higher velocity and, becoming some version of a guy that was in the top 3 of Cy Young voting last year. I don't think he's going from there to there in 1 month or let alone 1 week. So I don't have high expectations, but I also think, look, there's clearly a part of Alek Manoah that wanted to be back, right? And he's got to be driving a big part of this.
Yeah, I think so, for sure. Ross said it. Like, he was talking about star power on this team. He mentioned Bichette, Guerrero, and Manoah.
Yeah.
Like, that's how they look at him, as a young pillar piece that they hope will be a part of this team for a decade and sell a lot of jerseys and be a fan favorite and be a guy they can rely on for almost 200 innings every single season.
Yeah.
And again, it's not that injuries have led to this.
No.
It'd be a very different story if it was that something was flaring up, his elbow, his forearm, his shoulder, whatever. It's not the case. It's just simply performance.
And that's the question. Like, we heard Ross talk about like the micro adjustments that they made with the fast cameras that showed them that he was a little bit off of what he was doing previously when he was having more success. But maybe it's the micro adjustments, or maybe it's bigger picture stuff. Maybe it's mental. Maybe it's a little bit physical. Maybe, who knows? We don't know. We're going to find out, though.
That's asset management, right? It's not only about the physical part of it. A lot of it is about the mental part of it. And he got a mental reset.
Yeah.
He got away from it. He's going to join the team in Detroit. But that can be an awkward situation as well. You're going in there. He probably feels like all the eyes are on him, because they will be.
They are.
Right? All eyes are going to be on him. And what does he bring? And what does he do? And we'll see is the bullpen going to be available tomorrow night? And will the offense show up for him tomorrow night? At a minimum, you got to think the bats better be alive in Detroit, right? Like, you got to pick him up. Give him 5 innings. If he gives up 3 or 4 earned, so be it. It's better than nothing. But he was walking a lot of guys. He was throwing so many pitches per inning, more than anyone else that qualified in Major League Baseball. That'll be a sign that he's starting to turn the corner. If he's not putting as many guys on base for free, and he is reducing the amount of pitches it takes him to get out of jams, because it was getting goofy, man. There were some crazy innings early in the year from him.
Yeah, 42 walks, leading the American League. I think he had 51 all of last year. So it was just like way out of character. We didn't see this from him, anything close to this from him last year. So, yeah, whether he can command it out of his hand is one thing. Whether he's got the same velocity or get closer to the velocity he had a year ago is another thing. And then does he return to form in terms of mentally? Does he still have that, that competitive drive that made him such a compelling figure on the mound, right? And such an imposing figure on the mound.
Well, they're going to need him. They're going to need him. And Ross said what I think a lot of fans have been saying all year. It never feels like everything is connected for this team. Yet they're 46-40.
Yeah.
And they're legitimately in a wild card race. And, I might argue they're favored to pick up one of those 3 spots. Yet you played a lot of ball games. So, you're relying on it happening in the past, which it has. They've been in this situation. They're 45-40 a year ago. And they turn it on. They get 90-plus wins. They make the playoffs. You're banking on it happening again.
Yeah.
But it has been incredibly frustrating how, pitching, hitting, defense, fundamentals, they better sync if you're going to win a lot of ball games.
And then we heard Ross, and I have to look back at his answer and maybe transcribe it, type it out to figure out what exactly he was saying when I asked him about the
runners in scoring
position. Because he did allude to the fact that there's pressure.
Yes. Originally he said it's luck, but
Right.
then he circled by the end of it. He's like, that said, you can definitely feel it in big moments.
Right.
Which, yes, you can't quantify that, and everyone understands that. And I think that's been at the core of the debate for the last 20 years in baseball.
For sure.
Since sabermetrics arrived and analytics arrived, is how you quantify every at bat.
Mm-hmm.
And really like the source of that has been, I think, the battle over RBI is
stakes.
Yeah, exactly.
Ribeyes.
Stakes. You can't control who's going to be on base when you get up to the plate. You can't control, how many at bats you're going to get, the situation, blah, blah, blah. But I think that's what freaks out a lot of people in baseball. And I think Ross would probably fit into this camp is that you can't quantify it. Mm-hmm. So you just got to give your best guess on why that guy is better in that situation than other players. Because I believe in it.
Oh, yeah.
I know it. I think if you've played sports, you understand there's a difference when you step up to the plate and it's tied 0-0 in the first.
Mm-hmm.
Then when you're down 2 runs, there's 2 guys on base and there's 2 outs in the 9th.
Right.
Obviously that's a different situation.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, you're starting with an 0-0 count. Yes, you could step up and maybe you get lucky, maybe you don't. But how you feel when you step up to the plate, including how you feel if you're on the mound in that situation, is very different.
Yeah. And
there's a human element to sports. It has to be accepted.
And we all know there's certain guys that you feel good about being up there when they're on your team, and there's certain guys you feel bad about being up there.
Absolutely.
And you wish it was the other guy.
Yep.
In a moment like that, right?
That's right.
But what is it about this team that makes them 25th in batting average when they're runners in scoring position? It's hard to put a finger on.
And I think they're 3rd in the league in batting average.
That's what I mean.
Yeah.
Yeah. They can hit. They just don't hit when it matters.
Right. It can't all be luck.
I don't know.
It's not all luck.
It can't be luck.
It cannot all be luck.
But Ross was, I've heard Ross in various other interviews, including this one where he alluded to it.
Yeah.
There probably is
there is an element of it for sure.
There's a part
absolutely there is.
And there's got to be, and if you're an optimist and you believe that the numbers eventually, the law of averages is still in effect, you got to think that, hey, in the second half, they're due.
Yeah.
Where they're going to cash a few more of those.
Right. Well, I think, the frustration watching this team night in, night out can be their approach at the plate where, how many guys dig deep into counts.
Yeah.
That's the beauty of Bo Bichette is Bo goes up there every single at bat and he's fighting off pitches constantly.
He's great at that.
And, he's great at hitting balls opposite field. Why is that? Because he's waiting for it and then he's late to it, but he's still going to make contact on it. Where there's a number of guys that step up and you're like, they're just swinging, man. Or it feels that way anyway.
Yeah, it does.
It feels like they're just stepping up and they're swinging. That's the amazing thing about the Yankees historically, throughout my life. That's why it always seemed like they were playing 5-hour games because they were so committed to every at-bat. And if it's a 9, 10, 12 pitch at-bat, so be it.
Yeah, that was the internal culture. We want as many, every time you're up there for a
fight off everything
8, 9,
you can
10,
fight
11,
off.
12 pitch at bat, you've done a good job.
Right.
Whether you get a hit or not.
Exactly. Striking out on 12 pitches is a lot better than striking out on 3.
Right.
We'll take it.
Right.
Right. It's still a strikeout, but the context is different.
There's something to that approach. You're right. And you can definitely criticize their approach at times. And I'm sure internally
they're on top of this stuff. I think they're well aware of it.
Sure, they're trying to get that message hammered home, but sometimes it's just guys have habits, right?
Yeah. And a number of guys on this team have been up and down. Outside of Bichette, how many guys have been consistently good all year?
Yeah.
I think Kiermaier, based on expectations, been pretty consistent. Chapman's been up and down.
Very up and down.
Varshaw's been up and down. You know, Belt has been up and down. Like, he didn't start that well, and he got hot. He got hurt. Now he's in kind of out of rhythm right now. Vladdy's clearly had an inconsistent season. There've been times they've been red hot, but
and that's what Schneider said the other day. You know, they've been
even Springer, the same thing.
They've been consistently inconsistent.
Yep,
that's what they've been
for sure. OverDrive brought to you by FanDuel, bringing you everything from the opening line to the final score. We'll get to our best bets brought to you by ProLine coming up this hour. OverDrive continues, TSN 1050 and on TSN 2. All right, Connor Brown will join us in about a half an hour. Janine Becky in studio as well. The Women's World Cup right around the corner from Australia. Of course, you can watch all the games on TSN. I just saw a video of Victor Wembanyama. He's down in Vegas. And I guess allegedly, reportedly, a security guard that was with him got into an altercation with Britney Spears.
Bizarrely.
In Vegas.
Yeah.
Where TMZ was reporting that it was like a physical altercation. And now the police in Vegas are investigating. And on top of this, and we were talking about PR last hour, how teams are so protective. And Victor Wembanyama is doing a scrum and talking about the incident.
Yeah.
And how security was telling him while he was walking through the crowd, because there was a big crowd, like, don't stop. If anyone's calling you, don't stop. Keep going. And he admits that something happened between a security guard that was protecting him from the team and a woman who he said grabbed them from behind, I guess was looking for a picture. That's the story.
Yeah.
And it sounds like that woman that was grabbing at him was Britney Spears.
Right.
And what I'm shocked by is, like, Wembanyama is just talking freely about this situation. And in 2023, this screams the way teams generally operate would be no comment, no comment, no comment. Can't talk about it, guys. Sorry, the police are looking into it. The team will indicate some sort of, or the team pull him from the scrum and say, you're not talking.
Right.
Yet he's down there in Vegas just doing a scrum. It's kind of wild.
It is wild. Like, he is, like, by all accounts, people who've come in contact with this kid, he's like the nicest, most innocent, sincere, gregarious, kind person you could ever meet.
Right.
Like, and you just wonder, like, how long will it be until
there's some jaded
Greg Popovich and the San Antonio Spurs, you know, kind of suck that out of him and say, this ain't the way you talk to the media.
I know.
We treat the media like dirt down here.
Right.
That's how we do it.
Right, exactly. Well, because you know what they'll be bracing for, and they'll be telling him, if you have a dip in your game, they're going to call you soft.
Right.
The media is going to say you're too nice, you're too soft, you're not a killer.
That's right.
Right? Like, it's almost like you can already picture that narrative. Someone's going to grab it. Some big talking head in the States is going to grab that narrative. This guy will never be Jordan because he's too nice.
Not a killer.
He's not a killer, right? He can't do it the way Jordan could, the way Kobe could, the way Shaq could.
Right.
He ain't like that. That's coming.
Too nice.
Hey, too nice of a guy. But I'm shocked at how candid he is with the scrum about what actually happened.
Right.
Walking through. And afterwards, he's like, yeah, and then I went for dinner, and that was great. I'm like, man, you're involved in a controversy here, or your security is with Britney Spears.
And the police are allegedly involved. The police are,
and they're taking it seriously, by the way, as they should. I mean,
Yeah.
Britney Spears, if it's anyone, you would expect that they would take it seriously. But Britney Spears is of a certain profile, and, you know, she's been running the strip down there in Vegas for a while now.
Oh, yeah.
And it's kind of wild, the idea that Britney Spears is like, there's Victor Wembanyama, I got to get a pic with him.
Yes.
Like, that's someone I need to go out of my way. And wouldn't that cause a stir? Britney Spears just walking around,
I would think.
you know, the MGM or wherever she happens to be, wherever they're staying.
It's amazing.
Yeah, it is pretty wild.
Well, it would have been. I mean, everybody wants a picture with Victor because it's just like the most shocking sight in the history of humanity.
Just because he's so
to stand
tall.
next to this man. Like, he's such a large human being that even 7-footers look like regular guys next to him. And then if you're, you know, just a woman of, I don't know, how tall is Britney Spears? 5'4",
5'5", 5'7".
It's comical how much taller Victor is than every other average human being.
Well, that picture went viral recently where he was down in San Antonio with
David Robinson,
Tim Duncan, and Manu Ginobili, and he legitimately made Duncan, who's 7 feet, look like a point guard.
Yeah.
And David Robinson, who, like the Admiral, we're talking a guy that went in the paint with Shaq and with Elijah and battled. And this guy looked small, like legitimately like a small person compared to Victor.
Amazing.
It is wild. And this guy's taking step-back threes.
That's
a part of his game, is a step-back three.
Oh, he's so graceful. Like, his footwork is just so good for a guy that big.
I hope he stays healthy. I just hope he stays healthy. That has to be the concern, right?
Oh, of course.
He has got to. That's got to be the ultimate concern in the NBA with guys of that size.
But it's funny, you hear the reports about the way he was raised. Like, his mother was like a really strict, natural food person, like all organic, farm to table, no processed crap. And I remember this year we were talking to Nick Nurse about why is there so many injuries in the league, and Nick pointed to food. He was like, these guys grew up eating McDonald's, essentially. A lot of these guys. Like a lot of America. Like, America grows up eating crappy food.
Right.
And it doesn't bode well for your tendon health and your soft tissue health. And
wow, Nick was getting deep, huh?
Nick went deep that time. I asked him about it, and I think it was me that asked him. I can't remember. But I was doing a piece on just the rash of injuries yet again in the NBA. But this Wembanyama kid suddenly... I'm not like, look, touch wood. I'm with you. Like, a guy that big,
I'm worried about him.
You worry about him. But if you're kind of looking at a guy who might have a chance, certainly we've seen, lifestyle has a big impact on your longevity. Right?
Absolutely. There's a picture up on TSN too. Like, David Robinson is legit, 6'11"?
Yeah.
7 feet?
I mean, pretty much a 7-footer.
Yeah.
I mean, like
he's a legit center, man. He was back to the basket center.
Yeah.
How many threes did he attempt in his career? 5?
Yeah, that was a different era.
Maybe.
Right?
Yeah.
You guys didn't shoot threes in that era.
No. If that. I'm not sure David Robinson attempted 5 threes in his career.
I doubt he did.
Probably not.
I'd be shocked if he did.
Probably not. And he looks, honestly, like a 2-guard up against Victor Wembanyama.
It's incredible.
Like, he's maybe a wing option at that size. The big man in Toronto would be Jakob Poeltl, who signed a 4-year deal, and he was speaking today. And here's what he had to say about his conversations with Fred VanVleet prior to signing with the Raptors.
I was talking to Fred. Obviously, neither of us really knew going into it what was going to happen. Like, there was definitely some options for the both of us, and obviously, I would have liked to keep playing with Fred. Like, he's definitely a big part of my success here in Toronto as well. I feel like we created some good chemistry here. But I mean, that's the NBA. Like, you're going to have free agency, you're going to have trades, like, you're going to have change mid-season, and you're just going to have to roll with the punches. And I think we still have a really talented team. Like, we have some really good point guard replacements already. Like, I'm not really too worried about it.
I like that attitude. And he's right. Like, that's the nature of pro sports in the NBA. But,
he's not right about the fact they got good point guard replacements.
No.
Because they don't.
That's the whole thing. Like, their guard position has been a flaw for quite some time, including VanVleet. Like, VanVleet had a poor first half. Now, it changed when Poeltl arrived. And that's what Poeltl's saying. Like, all of a sudden, Fred, they were playing that high pick and roll a lot. And Fred started, I don't think it was a coincidence that all of a sudden his play started to improve. And Poeltl played a big role in that.
Yeah, that was a nice dynamic.
Absolutely. And the ball movement that Poeltl supplies. But I think, he's being diplomatic. Of course, he's going to, pump the tires of his new teammates.
Sure.
But the timing, he was also saying today, like, before I agreed to sign, I kind of thought maybe Fred was sticking around.
So did the Raptors.
And I think the Raptors probably did too.
Yeah.
Because it seems like that was their plan. Bring back Fred, sign Poeltl, and go back to the well with, Poeltl, Siakam, Anunoby, I guess Barnes, VanVleet starting 5.
Or bring back Fred, and if you're going to move anybody of the established guys, it's going to be Pascal.
Right. And move maybe Scotty to the 4 or possibly OG, I guess.
And maybe they'll still move Pascal. Who knows? So there's a lot of hot rumors around that. But yeah, this is not ideal. Let's just say this is a bad outcome.
Right. It's like asset management is not it's not been a good scene. And even now with Poeltl, like if Fred walks and then you move on from Siakam, you're looking at Poeltl thinking, okay, well, like him coming in slotted Siakam appropriately, and it elevated the play of VanVleet. But if both of them are gone, what are you getting from Poeltl?
Right.
Like, what is Poeltl going to bring if the ball's going to be in the hands of Scotty Barnes a lot more? And is he prepared for that? Like Scotty Barnes is not prepared to be a primary ball handler on a team that's going to win a lot of ball games.
Wow.
Like, that's just not – he is not ready for that role.
Unless you want Malachi Flynn playing a lot more minutes, he might have to be.
That's the issue. I'm not saying it won't happen.
Yeah.
And I'm assuming a big part of why Darko Rajokovic is here is because he came in and probably sold them on why he can make that work.
Sure.
I'm just saying that is going to be a learning process. Like there will be a bell curve for Scotty to get to that point.
Yes, indeed.
You know, because he's got handles, he's comfortable with the ball in his hands, but he is not a pure point guard. He is not.
Well, especially look, I mean, the more you take on that role too, and he talked about how he got tired at times this past season, right? Basically, acknowledging he needs to be in better condition. You're gonna have to be even better condition. You want to start taking point guard minutes.
Absolutely.
I mean, that's a toll. Not only on the offensive side of it.
Who are you going to guard?
Who are you going to guard?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like that's a part of it too. Like you can't trust Gary Trent to be guarding, a pure point guard.
No.
I don't think.
I mean, look,
Anunoby can do it, but OG you want on a different role.
That's the problem. Nick Nurse was openly critical of Gary Trent's defense at times last year, and rightly so. And you're right, Malachi Flynn. Dennis Schroeder is a water bug. He gets in the paint, but he doesn't shoot it well.
No.
And defensively, we'll see.
Like he's a good depth option, but if he's going to be playing 33, 34, 35 minutes a night,
it changes the tone.
That changes the tone.
Yeah, it does.
If he's coming off the bench and he's a guy that can give you good minutes and fill in when need be, change of pace. Exactly. I think that's.
Yeah, he was good like that for the Lakers, right?
Exactly.
Like he's played more off the bench than he has as a starter in his NBA career, and I think he's been more effective as a bench player.
Right. But as of now, the way it sets up, he's going to be the guy. Yeah, he's probably your number one.
Yeah. So not ideal.
No.
Not ideal. And maybe that's why they got to go further now. Like if you're Masai Ujiri, like, okay, well, that didn't go to plan.
Right.
We could have traded Fred. We didn't at the deadline, and now we got nothing for him. Maybe we got to change the tack in another way. Like it can't just be like for him to say I didn't enjoy watching this team play. You can't just bring back essentially the same team. And I know there's been a few changes, but if you're bringing back Siakam and you're bringing back the core of Siakam and OG and Barnes and Poeltl, it really, and then it's just kind of like great, Grady Dick and Dennis Schroeder.
And maybe a healthy Otto Porter.
Well, ideally, yeah.
But who knows what
are
you're
the odds
getting
of
there?
that?
Yeah, exactly.
I mean,
and even that, he's a depth.
Those changes aren't significant enough.
No. See, I always took that comment more as a shot at Nick Nurse than the players.
That's a good point.
Like they clearly were not on the same page.
No,
but
there's been a lot blamed on Nick Nurse.
I agree.
Not directly, but certainly a lot of implication. Lot of
hey, Nick, you're the reason we're in the situation we're in certain areas where I think Nick can make a very good case and one that I would side with. Not to jump on Malachi Flynn, but Malachi Flynn is not a legitimate option as a backup point guard in this league.
Oh, they're gonna
force him into
tell
it.
you he is.
Absolutely.
This season.
Yeah, absolutely. But I understand why Nick was like, I can't do that.
No.
I'm not going to that bench. Like, what do you want me to do? Who am I playing?
Exactly.
Right? And you look at the guys who had down years. Chris Boucher had a big step backwards.
He did.
Season. Precious was injuries in much colder than hotter.
Yeah.
This year compared to his first year.
Totally. Yeah, no, and I think
easy to blame the coach, but the players didn't hold up their end of the bargain, and I would say management didn't either.
Well, and that's the thing. Like that's what we're going to find out this season because they're making the case that there was untapped potential on that bench last year, and we're about to see it.
We will find out if Darko Rajokovic has a magic touch. Connor Brown, the newest member of the Edmonton Oilers, former Leaf. He will join us in about 15 minutes. Overdrive continues, TSN 1050 and on TSN 2. All right, the John Deere is off and running, and also the U.S. Women's Open out of Pebble Beach. Yet it's Brooks Kepka and Liv Golf making some news today because Kepka absolutely destroying Matthew Wolff. Wolff is a part of his team Smash. I feel so goofy even saying that.
So silly.
Smash GC. But, and I guess there's been issues like Wolff has left the team and then been returned to the team. And, it's a team concept there. But Kepka just tore a strip off him and saying he's completely wasted his talent. And said, quote, it's very tough to even have a team dynamic when you've got one guy that won't work, one guy that's not going to give an effort. He's going to quit on the course, break clubs, gets down, bad body language. It's very tough. I've basically given up on him. A lot of talent, but I mean the talent's wasted.
Wow.
What a carve job. Like that's a personal attack on the guy.
You don't see that in golf.
You don't see that very often. Well, you never see it because there's no team dynamic. You don't care about anybody else on tour.
Right. That's wild. Like, yeah, I guess maybe you see it at the Ryder Cup if guys are. Well, yeah, you saw it with the way Phil Mickelson disrespected, various Ryder Cup captains over the years.
Sure.
But yeah, this is wild.
Yeah.
And I happen to look. Matt Wolff's battled some. He took some time off for mental health issues.
He's spoken about that publicly. Yeah.
So I don't know what's behind. This. Obviously, Matt Wolff isn't playing anywhere near at the level that people thought he could when he was the best player in
college golf.
College back in 2019.
Yeah. He came out with Morikawa and Hovland as that was the big three, and Wolff he went on tour pretty quickly too. Yeah, he went on the PGA Tour.
What was he? The 54-hole leader at a U.S.
Open at Winged Foot.
Yeah, I mean he played really well there. He's had some, he's got a bunch of endorsements.
Yeah.
He was a big fan favorite. The weird swing. The interesting guy, right? And yeah,
Brooksy
I'm shocked by this in a lot of ways. Like but Brooksy's a grumpy too.
That's the thing. I think Kepka's always wanted this because he's always felt like a nerd playing golf.
Yeah.
Right? He's always been embarrassed. You can tell he wants to play hockey or football. Like that's what he wants to do.
He's tough, yeah.
And now he's the team captain of a team, and he's like, this is what I've always wanted to do: is carve a guy who's not pulling his weight.
That's probably it.
And I think that's what he's done here.
My opportunity.
Yeah, he's like, I have a whipping boy finally, and I'm going to do it. Final hour coming up. Connor Brown of the Edmonton Oilers will join us, and Janine Becky in studio as well. Best Bets brought to you by FanDuel, still to come. OverDrive continues. TSN 1050 and up on TSN 2.